Please, we still haven't finished. We have one more workshop left. Those who want to leave is fine, but we will continue, inshallah. And the last workshop is going to be on social media and its impact on us. I'm sorry we crammed a lot, I know, but we're at your service, inshallah. You took the wire? Okay. Okay, fellas. We just work with it. The wire is actually upstairs. Yeah. The brother took it to the third. It's okay. I can. I don't want you to. That can be. You can sit over here. Thank you for your patience. I'm gonna get it. Yeah. 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 No, yeah, she's coming. Sister Gabriela. So let's begin while they are working out the technical difficulties. So we want to talk about, let's open this up a little bit for a few minutes. We want to talk about the issue of social media in the family. I need somebody to tell me when they hear social media in the family, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Huh? Snapchat. What else? Huh? Facebook. What about those things? What about Snapchat? What about Facebook? Tell me something else. Huh? TikTok. But what about it? How does it relate to us? Does is destroying our youth? Why do you say that? Is destroying our values. You want to take it from there, Sister Gabriela? Well, we.
Okay, so most of the times when we talk about social media, we think of it in a negative way. But it doesn't have to be like that. It depends on us and the use that we give to the social media. I will give a personal example. Um, I have Facebook. And the main reason that I want to say, because, we are in community, is that I have Facebook to connect with my granny because my granny doesn't live here. She lives far away, right? So the main reason why, let's say, social media was created was to connect people, right? And it just starts to escalate from there, right? Not only to connect, but to share ideas and audiovisual things that can sometimes make us overwhelmed, right? And that gives us an idea when we are overwhelmed that our life is not as good, right? Because we see someone else that is doing, posting, sharing things that we don't have and we wish we had. And we forget that people share what they want to share, but they hide a lot of things that are behind, right? So, not everything about social media is negative. It depends on the use that we give them and how long we spend in it, in time.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. Jazakallah khair, Imam Yusuf, for having us here and inviting us to give this presentation. And Jazakallah khair to North Hudson Islamic Educational Center for hosting this event. For mashallah, 23rd year in a row, a family day and a family conference. May Allah bless you, this community and increase your reward, inshallah. I mean, I was asked to speak a little bit about social media today, and I'm very thankful for the comments that Sister Gabriela set us up with, because she's absolutely right to point out that social media, the internet, smart technology, that these things are not negative in and of themselves, but it depends how you use it. So I'll be sharing with you my perspective today, sharing some points. Yes, please.
There's a gray Honda Accord that's blocking the driveway across from the masjid. A gray Honda Accord. Is it anybody's? Does anybody have a gray Honda Accord?
So inshallah, I'll be sharing a perspective today about over-reliance on the internet or over-reliance on smartphones or social media. But before I do that, I just want to begin by asking all of you, what is your family's experience with social media? Who can share some of the positive or negative impacts of social media, smartphones, using the internet a lot on your family situation? Yes, brother. Mhm.
My generation, they don't stay in touch no matter what.
MashaAllah.
I know like almost every single one of my cousins told my mom. None of them have our roots in it.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Jazakallah khair, brother. So he said it helps his generation stay in touch with all the cousins, and they do that using their phones and different apps. MashaAllah. Thank you. Anybody else? What's your family's experience with social media? Before I give you my perspective and ask you to take my word for it, I want to hear from the families who are here tonight. Jazakallah khair, brother. The brother said that, the endless scrolling, that in his observation, people spend too much time doing that nowadays. So maybe you've also observed that in your family situation. Anyone else? Yes, please. Yes, Khalil? Allahu Akbar. So something about being in this masjid today has opened his heart to such a deep reflection upon himself and his own practice of social media that my son said that when you go on your device, you think I'm going to be only 10 minutes, but 10 turns to 20 and 20 turns to 30 and you don't even notice it. So Jazakallah khair, brother, for sharing that. MashaAllah.
I wanted to share something really fast too. In counseling and dealing with the community, sometimes what we see, especially when people have problems, they go to social media and they talk about their problems. And people do it in different ways. Sometimes they'll talk about what's going on between husband and wife, or sometimes they'll talk about what a family member did, or sometimes they will talk about themselves, and you know that the person is having problems, right? So then what happens is that now that family of that person that was sharing their experience, everybody begins to know about the problem, either from outside of the family, you see what I'm saying, or other family members. So we see that some families, they get caught up into that. Another thing is this, and I'm going to be very open, because, we may never come back again to this topic, inshallah we will. But the worst thing that a person can do, and I've seen this, and I saw this when I was in Chicago, and because our community, we don't like to talk about our problems, anything, is to be out in the open. But one time a brother told me, he said, what do you tell, and this is not to beat up on the women at all, just because the example happens to deal with women. What do you tell a brother whose wife was having problems with him? She met someone online and she started to confide in that person, and they began to develop a relationship. Of course, everybody's experience with social media is not negative from that angle. It may be negative from another angle. It may be negative from the angle, for instance, before social media, there was TV like Al Jazeera, when Israel was bombing Lebanon, I was in Egypt at that time, and I lived in front of the TV, and I was like struggling with the issue. Nowadays, we go to social media, we see what happened in Yemen, we see what happened in Philistine, and not only do we see what happened, like in a clean way, we may see someone get killed. You know what I'm saying? Or we may see some. It has an impact on us. So sometimes what happens is that the whole family begins to live out their reality. Whether it's you trust people on social media with your problems and then it breaks up your family, or whether you're looking at something and it's having a negative impact. So we have two sides here. Using social media to connect with people positively, and then we have the other side. And I wanted to share that because I know some of us can relate to that on some issues.
Jazakallah khair, Imam. Imam, do I go until 9:45? Just so I know.
Yeah.
Okay, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. So would anybody else like to share any observation from their family of any experience with social media? Yes, sister.
I just got back from a trip, a family reunion in Texas, and I got in trouble with my sister because every time I went live on Facebook, I don't know why, but I guess like she's really conservative or sort of like really private, and I don't know. I'm just the kind of live person, so I just like sharing my experiences with like my friends and family and stuff, but they're sort of like really like private, I guess. So I guess that's an issue, like, but hopefully like I don't go live anymore so they don't get mad. Sorry, Baba, I had to share this.
Yeah, no, Jazakallah khair, sister. And you bring up an important point, which is privacy. So I think The Onion, if you guys know The Onion newspaper, the satirical comedy newspaper, they have a video on YouTube about a child who's doing a commercial and pleading for help because since she was a baby, her parents put her pictures up on Facebook. And she can, it's being satirical, but it's making a good point about privacy. So I think you touch on an important topic. I'll just share with everyone my own perspective here, which is that there are a couple of ways, 5 ways I'm going to talk to you about tonight, that if we rely too much on social media, I'm not saying any contact with social media is problematic. It's not. Social media has a lot of good in it as well, potentially. But when we overly rely on social media, or we overly rely on our smartphones, or we overly interact with the internet, that there are at least 5 ways that this will problematize our full personhood as Muslims, right? So there are potential risks to our faith and our life of faith if we overly exercise social media and rely on it too much to the point where we develop an unhealthy addiction, you can say. So I'm just speaking from a narrow scope. So it's just like a cautionary perspective that I would like to share with all of you, inshallah. So we know that our personhood in Islam, we have different aspects of our being, and each of them has a role to play and to fulfill so that we can be successful in our mission as human beings before we return to Allah. And there are ways in which, when we overly rely on social media, there's the 5 ways that we are prevented from reaching our full potential. We all want to imitate the Prophet ﷺ because he was the perfect human being. And so we aim for copying his example. But the first one is sight, right? When we overly interact with social media, it does something to our vision. And I don't just mean our eyes, like we're going to have blurry vision and now we're going to wear glasses. Actually, that happens too if you're too much on your phone or your computer. But I mean your vision, like your spiritual vision, your intellective vision. The qalb is the seat of the intellect in the human being, the heart. So we were hearing earlier about emotional intelligence versus the brain. So the sight is the first one. The next one is addiction, right? Social media lends itself to addictive behavior, and I'll give some of the details of that. And again, this is just a cautionary tone. It's not saying to throw your cell phone out the window. Nobody can do that, and nobody wants to do that. And I'm not saying we should do that, but just to be more aware and more mindful so we can check our own use of these things. The third one is our mutual rights over one another. Right, so we have, as Muslims and even as non-Muslims, as fellow human beings in the human family, the animals, everything. We have rights over one another, which are, rooted in the hukuk of Allah upon His creatures. And so there is something about social media that takes us apart from one another, and then we fail to fulfill those mutual rights in certain ways. And the other one is caring for the earth and her creatures. So as the Khalifa of Allah upon the earth, and all the animals and the trees and the mountains and the rivers have to be safe. And it is the human being that has the human being has the obligation to fulfill that role and to be that steward on the earth. So there's ways in which the electronic gadgets are really defying this aspect of our responsibility before Allah. And the last one, as you can see, the hearts lit up here, is two things. One is what the sister brought up, which is privacy, and the other is stillness, or khushu', right? Stillness of the heart. There are certain things that can only be accomplished in a close communion, a private communion with Allah, if everything noisy is emptied out first. And one of the things that too much social media does is it fills us with noise. And it fills us with a noise that you can never turn it off. Even when your phone is off, the noise is still going on inside of you. So those are the 5 areas, and I'll just start, and we'll start one by one, inshallah. I should be done in about 25 minutes. So the first one I said was the sight, right? The vision. And in this one, we just ask the general question, what is framing? And actually, this was touched upon earlier in one of the other presentations. But whenever we say framing, there's 2 questions. What does the screen show, right? The screen can be your phone. The screen can be like a post on social media that you're looking at and you liked it. It can be a TV screen or, on your computer. But what does the screen show? Whatever's inside of the frame. But what does the screen hide? Whenever you are seeing something on social media, there's a deliberate frame around it, and everything outside of that frame is being hidden from your view. So I'm going to turn your attention to the screen here. And as you can see, this is an example, right? There is a photograph, very famous photograph. It won, I think, Time Magazine's most impactful, top 100 photographs at some point in history. It's a photograph of a group of people, young adults, and they seem to be at a party. Right? So they seem to be socializing. Maybe it's a dinner, maybe it's a party of some sort. So the screen is showing the party, the young people, they're enjoying themselves. Now, before I go to the next slide, I'm just gonna give a warning that there's violence on the next slide. So if you don't want your children to look at it, just have them turn away. But for the second question, what does the screen hide? This is actually a photograph of a lynching in the United States, and you can see the 2 men in the back hanging from trees who have been killed by mob violence, right? By quote unquote mob justice, which is not justice. And it is also a party. So you do actually have these people who have gathered to have a party. But my point here is that social media is that yellow frame. And we have to be extremely careful when we are using social media to get news, to get truth, to get perspectives, to get information. We're not actually getting a fair piece of knowledge necessarily. You might be, you might not be, but you have no way of knowing. It's like when the shayateen go up to heaven to try to get a glimpse of the qadr of Allah. And the angels, they throw stars and fire at them to get them away. Some of what they get is true and some of what they get is false. But how do you know the difference? You go to the soothsayer to have your fortune read. How do you know what's true and what's false? You don't. And the same is true on social media because of this frame. You might be getting the full picture. You might be getting a completely distorted vision where you think what you're experiencing is this party, but really you didn't know it was a lynching. So that's the first thing. Because framing focuses our attention on something, it excludes the rest of reality, and by changing the context, it changes the whole meaning, right? This is what I teach my students. There is no content without context. So be very careful of the things that try to block you from the context. Another issue with regard to our vision and our perspective is that in social media, we get trapped in echo chambers. We think, This is an open space. It's a free public space. The internet has achieved what in society we failed to achieve, which is a free and open public sphere. A public space, a democratic space, we can all share our ideas. But actually, studies have shown that people consume content that is in line with their pre-existing beliefs already. So as you can see from the gentleman here, poor chap, he's telling himself that he's right, and he hears it echoed back to him, because the content that he chooses to consume on social media only reaffirms his pre-existing biases. It's not necessarily knowledge that is illuminating whether or not his position is correct, but it's a numbers game. How many people out there have validated my post? How many likes, how many shares? And that somehow is a indicator of whether or not it's true or false. It's actually not. More and more younger people, from millennials to Gen Z now, they get their news from Facebook as their political news. And so that should be something that is alarming to us, because previously, the New York Times or CNN or Fox News or NBC or the Washington Post, or Al Jazeera news outlets, they stick to journalistic ethics and standards, right? Publishing houses. You can't publish a book with a publishing house until you have met the standard of their academic rigor and you provide evidence. Social media is a free-for-all, right? Anyone can make a news clip and it's going to be circulated right alongside the other news clips. So it's not the best idea to get your news from Facebook, in other words. We know this as well, that on Twitter, 126,000 rumors were spread. I believe this was in 2020. 3 million users spread those rumors, and it was tweeted or retweeted 4.5 million times. And between 1,000 and 100,000 people were reached with fake news. So this is like when you play telephone and you whisper in someone's ear, and by the time it gets to the end of the room, the story has completely changed, right? But you're like, but I heard it. And so now you go on the authority of your own capacity to see, to read, to hear, to listen. You say, well, it must be true, because with my 5 senses and my rational mind, I have obtained this piece of information. But what you don't know is that that piece of information has been dragged around a space that has no scruples when it comes to true and false and journalistic standards. I apologize for being very harsh in my critique of social media. It's just one perspective, among others. Another issue is troll factories. This also hit the news when Russian President Putin was accused of interfering with the elections with Donald Trump, that there are physical factories, for example, in Russia, as the one that is pictured here, where people work 12-hour shifts, and they are just creating content on the internet for the purpose of influencing political decisions in other countries. So this is like people's full-time job. And this down here is a picture from Metropolis, for those of you that know that film, a black and white film from the early days of American cinema, which is really a critique of, the drudgery of factory life and how the modern world has made people into slaves. And, it's an interesting film, but as one group of workers, exhausted and completely spent, is leaving the factory, the next fresh batch is, the fresh blood is coming in to take their place. And this is what happens at these troll factories, actually. And they are producing posts for social media to get the numbers up, to get the circulation up, to get retweeted and reshared on Facebook, to get more likes on YouTube, to get circulated, so that the opinions can begin to influence people's actual perspectives on very important issues. This is what I believe the brother here mentioned this in his comments at the start of our presentation, the danger of the endless scroll. As you can see here, I just took some examples. So everyday life, cute cats, advertisements, deadly violence, war, everyday life, cute cats, advertisements. And let's say this is my scroll, because I like cute cats, everyday life, and war and deadly violence, right? As I scroll through my social media, endlessly scrolling, addicted to scrolling, the problem with this is what I mentioned to Imam earlier. There's an epistemic shift in our mind. We don't put values in the same hierarchy as before. So, absolutely. So cute cats, this is part of daily life, something to make you smile, something to make you appreciate Allah's nature, a sign of Allah, right? As something beautiful. everyday life, we can relate to each other. It's a social space. I love jokes about parenting because it helps take the edge off parenting, right? I really enjoy a good parenting joke. So that's like everyday life. It's important. It has a place in our life. It's how we relate to each other and we don't feel alone in our struggles. But what about advertisements? Okay, so that's legitimate. That's business, right? Tijarat, like we have to buy and sell to make a living in society, move the wealth around in society. But now deadly violence, right? Like let's say another unarmed person shot by the police, for example, or war, and you have ravages going on because of warfare in different countries. We don't react to these things based on what they should, what reaction we should give. So if we hear that a life was taken, we know, because Allah says in the Quran that the one who takes one life, it's as if he killed all of humanity. And the one who saves one life, it's as if he saved all of humanity. So if we hear that someone was killed, that should impact us with a severity. That should bring us down for the rest of the week. If our hearts are soft, inshallah. May Allah give us tawfiq. But we see it, and then we go like this, and now we're back to the cute cats. So what I'm suggesting to you is that the universe of values has been equalized, right? Somebody getting killed, a war in another country, children dying of starvation every day, cute cats, and commercials from my favorite retailer, they all occupy the same level of importance in the scroll. And the more time you spend scrolling, the more you organize your thoughts with the same structure of the scroll, which is that every little piece of information is equal. And in reality, they're not equal. If I told you that 3 billion North American birds were killed, died in a single year, and that this is from a species environmental perspective, this is a complete disaster and a really bad sign, you might like the post and then you go on to the cute cats again, right? So, nothing against cute cats, but I'm just trying to make the point that this has smashed and leveled our sense of a hierarchy of values because we react. How do we react to these posts? Okay, I'll put up a crying face for the dead birds. I'll put up an angry face for another man getting killed by the police. I'll put the heart eyes for the cute cats. I'll put you get the point. I'll make a laughing face for the parenting meme. And what am I really doing? That's all I'm doing. And this is a problem because we are agents, right? We have agency. Allah gave us hands with which to do works in the world. Allah gave us eyes with which to see and interpret, and ears, and so many faculties and senses so that we can find our way in this world to a straight path that will lead to His pleasure. But we spend a lot of time just clicking, and it's reduced to our favorite emojis, right? Not even emotions. An emotion is not an emoji. An emotion is something that hits your heart, and now you have to let it pass all the way through you, and now you're a different person because of you experienced that emotion. But an emoji is a light on a screen. It doesn't mean much. It's just numbers. It's just in this huge data economy. How many people liked this? How many people are angry at this? It's not an emotion. So we have to be wary. What percentage of our action in the world is actual, authentic? To borrow the words from Dr. Hatem's presentation, is authentic action, and how much of it is this kind of, caricature of moral action? So moving on, these are some scenes from a music video by Moby, where you can really see that some of these images, they've created drudgery in the world, right? They've created human beings who walk around unaware of what's around them, because maybe you're on the train on your phone and you don't know who's sitting next to you. You don't know if the person next to you needs help or not, because you're over here. You're in another universe. And you're in a universe that's made up entirely of your own preferences. But we'll get to that point in just a moment. So another, and this is just a piece of artwork I found from an artist. I thought it was interesting. I don't mean to suggest that any one of us here is in this condition, but it was a powerful image, so I decided to include it. But the internet addiction is now considered psychological. It's in the DSM, the latest edition on the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. Psychologists are accepting that this is a type of addiction, and it's very real. It's a compulsive behavior. It involves obsessive thoughts, tolerance, craving, and withdrawal. So, the same kind of things you'd go through with crack cocaine. right? The addiction has the same life cycle when it comes to the internet, that it causes psychological, social, marital, and or academic difficulties. And there's studies out there to show that. We have a scholar from MIT, Judith Donath, who has shown through her studies that every time you get validated on social media, it's like you got a hit of dopamine in your brain. So it has literally much of the same effect as having addiction to certain substances, right? To substance abuse, that there's a striking parallel there. And we all know, I was telling my daughter yesterday, that the life of an influencer is not as happy as it seems behind the frame of her Instagram account or his Instagram account, right? That a lot of times when people get canceled on social media, people who have these huge followings, that they had forgotten that they were an actual person instead of just a framed version of themselves. And when that structure crumbles, when their profile crumbles, when they've gotten canceled and hated on by the internet, by the angry mob on the internet, a lot of times people turn to suicide. They can't take it anymore because they fell from grace in such a way. And that, this kind of helps us to explain some of the effects of internet addiction. According to the same studies, is stiff or numb limbs, weight gain, back and shoulder pain, carpal tunnel syndrome, blurry or strained vision. So if you spend too much time, they say that sitting is the new smoking. So a lot of times we spend way too much time sitting, and it's bad for our heart, it's bad for our lungs and our kidneys. It stops the circulation in our bodies. So it's very important to not spend too much time on the internet, because when you're sitting like that or reclining or with bad posture, it's going to also have physiological effects on you. When it comes to children, subhanAllah, maybe some of you can relate to this, but a lot of our kids are addicted to their devices. And again, the Muslim family is facing a lot of challenges today. And I understand why parents will oftentimes, back in the 60s, a sociologist called the TV the blue babysitter, because parents who were working and, the economy was changing and there was nuclear families, parents put their kids in front of the TV in the 60s, and that's the babysitting, so they can go and get other things done. Nowadays, you just give the child a device, right? Wants mommy's phone, wants daddy's phone, wants their own phone, whatever it is. And what happens when you take a phone away from a child? This happens, right? Like I see this at every age level. When you try to take device time away from a child, or if a child has been on a phone for too long, and even the parent is starting to detect that something is wrong here, the instincts are saying like, okay, we need to put the phone away. This is the reaction that you get. And the children are able to mirror for us kind of this dependency and this addictive behavior. And there's, the American Pediatric Association and other branches of the American Pediatric Association have produced really extensive studies that show that introducing digital literacy or digital habits, digital media, into adolescent and children's lifestyles, that yes, it has some benefits. So you can help children to learn how to navigate devices, help them learn how to navigate the internet and internet sources. You can show them new ideas. It can be educational. You can let them be in contact. For example, my kids can talk to their grandma over WhatsApp, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible. So there's a lot of benefits in it, access to health information. But at the same time, they have found in their studies quite extensively that children who spend too much time with digital media have problems sleeping, they have attention deficit, and they have problems learning. There's something happens in the brain that they now have new obstacles to learning. There's obesity and depression, and that they can be exposed to unsafe material on these digital devices. So you can put certain fail-safes on your phone, but at some point your children may actually be exposed to either false information, inappropriate content, or just, unsafe people might actually try to reach out to them. So we have to be extremely cautious. And then there's the privacy. I honestly don't think that we should take phones into our bedrooms at night. We come from a tradition where we were told that, when a husband and wife draw their curtain, even children are not supposed to come in without permission. But we take our phones into our bedrooms. And believe me when I tell you, the phone is never off, right? If you have an alarm on your phone so you can wake up for Fajr, there is information that can be transmitted very easily from your phone, from sound to the camera to your heart rate. Your phone can actually detect your heart rate. And there are third parties, private and governmental, which pay for this type of data. You and I don't know how to read those really long agreements that you have to check the box. Check here if you agree. And you're like, well, what am I agreeing to? It's like 12 pages long and in legal language. Nobody knows how to read that, unless you're a lawyer. And I don't know if you have the time to read that, but you are giving your data away to companies, to third-party companies and to the government, and bringing those things into the dining table. We're supposed to be having dinner, but the phone is there, right? Into the masala, into the bedroom, into our children's spaces. So it would be a great idea to really just have like a box in the front of your house where you put your phones. And when you need it, you go there, you use it, and you put it back. You don't really want the phone to be the other member of your family that goes into every room with you, because like I said, it is constantly transmitting data. And there's reporters at the Washington Post who have published studies. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, your phone is sending data about movement in your house to a third party because it's hooked up to your security system, right? Or to your thermostat. Now with smartphones, you can integrate all your technology. So everything that's happening in your house that is connected to your phone or to your Wi-Fi can be sold as data to third parties. So that is definitely a privacy concern that we should consider. Another aspect, and inshallah I'll wrap it up after this one, is our mutual rights over one another. So you can see here in this picture, this beautiful picture of a Muslim brother helping a woman down the stairs and her dog as well. And there is something about being overly reliant on social media that prevents us from fully realizing our mutual rights over one another. And the two ways is, number one, it can alienate us socially in our actual social spaces, while it can still connect us to people who are far away, alhamdulillah. But in our immediate spaces, it can be alienating. And the other one is to consider, where does this technology come from? And for that, we have to look at the global supply chain. This is not, Santa Claus doesn't exist. He doesn't just drop a cell phone into everybody's pocket. These come from somewhere. They're mined somewhere. They're produced somewhere. And then they reach us. And so we have to look more closely at that. So you have another professor from MIT who gives this talk. She's got a TED Talk, Connected But Alone, and she has a book of the same name. And she says that, being on social media prevents us from relating to other people, prevents us from the capacity to be alone and to self-reflect, right? Murakkaba. Can we really do murakkaba if we're always thinking about what other people said on social media and who liked what I said and who didn't like it? It takes away our empathy. And in exchange, we're always connected. But she's questioning. She's saying, what kind of connection is this? Is this authentic connection? Or is this standing in place of authentic connection? And so she says something very interesting, I think, for a Muslim community to consider. She says, these days, those phones in our pockets are changing our minds and hearts because they offer us 3 gratifying fantasies. So the 3 lies that our phones tell us. 1, that we can put our attention wherever we want it to be, right? You choose what you look at on your phone instead of the world showing you, Allah showing you in the world what you need to look at. 2, that we will always be heard. So that's also interesting. We put something out on the internet and we assume we have a huge audience who's going to acknowledge us and validate us, right? And 3, that we will never have to be alone. And this is the most important one, because that is changing our psyches, she says. The moment that people are alone, even for a few seconds, they become anxious, they panic, they fidget, they reach for a device. Just think of people at a checkout line or at a red light. Being alone feels like a problem that needs to be solved. So just something to consider. With regards to the global supply chain, this is from The Story of Stuff, which is a great resource for young people, for older people, about how things are produced in the world and what is kind of the global economic system right now. It's like a 12-minute video. The materials economy extracts, then produces, then distributes, then those products are consumed, and then they're disposed. Those are the 5 points of the materials economy. And in the case of our cell phones, they are mined. For example, the coltan is the mineral that is needed for all cell phones and electronic devices. And most of the world's coltan comes from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There are forced labor camps and horrible conditions in the Democratic Republic of Congo where this mineral is mined in order for it to be used to make more and more cell phones. Like, why do we need new cell phone models every single year, right? Why can't they just build a cell phone that lasts 15, 20 years? And so as a result of this created demand for newer cell phones, Actually they're built to break. In 1 or 2 years, they just start going sour, and now you have to replace it, right? But, one NGO based out of Washington, D.C. called Free the Slaves, they did a study where they went to the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they found 866 cases of slavery in the South Kivu province in 2013. Actual slavery, people who are not allowed to leave, and people who work from can't see in the morning to can't see at night, and live in awful conditions, and are beaten, and have health problems, and have no recourse, right? So actual slavery. And out of these 866 cases, 23% were children. So we also have to consider that when we expect a certain type of lifestyle here, in our context, in our society, smart boards in every classroom and smart technology for every child learner, that those children have counterparts in other parts of the world whose whole lives have been turned to slavery just to be able to keep that steady supply coming. And the same is true for a company in Taiwan called Foxconn, right? It's the world's largest manufacturer of electronics. It makes, since 2001, it's had the contract to produce for Apple, and it has a 13-digit net worth, right? That's $4.706 trillion. And at Foxconn, I think the number of workers at Foxconn, I want to get this right, is 803,000, right? And so they collude with local municipalities. They bring workers in who have to live in the camps. The camps are like prisons, essentially. There's NGOs that have gone and tried to research and try to bring light and attention to this. But the people who work there, they can't leave. They're often physically abused by the guards. If they try to dial 911, the Taiwanese version of 911, the phone call gets directed to the gate at the Foxconn factory. There were 25 young people who committed suicide in 1 year who worked there. And so I don't want to kind of go further and further into this, but it's a very serious issue that our gadgets are not coming from halal sources 100%. And I'm not saying that from a fiqh perspective, because I don't have the qualification to say that. I'm saying it just from an ethical point of view, something for us to consider. Maybe we can make some choices in our own personal life, based on this information. So I'll just skip ahead, inshallah, because I see I'm out of time. Can I get 5 more minutes, or we have to close now? 3 minutes, okay. Okay, inshallah, jazakallah. I apologize for going over the time. So the last 2 points were, our stewardship of the earth. And here we have to take a look of how, when our phones break and we throw them away, where do they go? And this concept that the cloud, everything that's online, that it exists on some invisible cloud somewhere, no problem. But actually, when we throw away our gadgets, most of them, this is an example of Gaiyu, China, which is the world's largest recipient of electronic waste. It gets about 70% of the world's electronics when they get thrown away. And they receive 25 million tons annually. And those gadgets are full of toxins like lead, beryllium, cadmium, and mercury, which are cancer-causing neurotoxin. And you have the men, women, and children of Gaiyu, who their job every single day is to go to the dumps and pick through the dumps for pieces that can be sold and recycled and upcycled into new gadgets. But of course, the asthma rates, the cancer rates in that town are through the roof. The people are extremely sick because of what end of the supply chain they are in charge of dealing with. So, and of course, the cloud is also not invisible. It's not limitless. There are actual server farms and actual electricity, which is extremely bad for the environment. Just to keep the cloud up, to hold all that data is not free. It has a tremendous environmental cost. So the example of the movie Avatar, which is a very, eco-friendly movie, in the last month of the movie's production, 40,000 processors were handling 7 or 8 gigabytes of data per second, running 24 hours a day. So to create this eco-friendly movie, you had to destroy a lot of natural resources, just to give an example. And the very last, I'm at the end of the presentation now, the question of stillness, the interior space in each of us. When we go for salah and we try, we make the intention, oh Allah, please help us to make salah with khushu', right? With stillness, with presence. We don't want to just, let the words leave our mouth, but we didn't pay attention to them at all. We want to pay attention, as was mentioned earlier today. And so it's really important to try to unplug as much as we can, to try to gain back some of that quietude and some of that stillness, because the constant hustle and bustle and activity and the words. The less words you say, the more each one means. So if you consume too much social media, all you're hearing all day is words, 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 back and forth, images. It's a sensory overstimulation. And so each word now means very little. It means less than a penny, really, because you're consuming a million of them a day. So no word can really mean anything anymore. And so that's important. And also our privacy, as I mentioned, and our stillness. So Jazakallah khair, that's the end of the presentation.
Hello. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I learned so much, mashallah, doctor. It was, wallahi, very, very important information. And I know that it's just a lot to take in sometimes, but sometimes we really do need to hear the negative side in order to be more positive and to bring healthier habits and healthier thinking and an outlook into our families. So, I had a few things that I wanted to say, but I do want to speak on the youth, especially for our families. So, the youth, we mentioned TikTok. That is the biggest thing that's happening right now. I have many nieces and nephews, cousins, little kids that I see on TikTok. I had an account and then I left because I saw of how toxic it is. I want to mention that it is toxic, it can be unhealthy, and there are a lot of things in life that can be unhealthy, but there you can also use it for positive. So, of course, it absolutely unethical at most times, but I do want to mention that from different spaces and different workspaces, you can utilize it for good. And I know that it's really difficult to utilize it for good, especially when there's so much toxicity and it's just unhealthy to be consuming all of these things. Our mental can't handle it. It's just not right to have, and it really gets a weight on us after a while. But I feel that with our youth, when we want to navigate this with them, instead of lecturing them like our parents did to us, and had that disconnect where they would speak to us, but it would be a like you have no choice kind of thing. We're gonna talk to you. Our parents would talk to us, but you have to listen. There's no you can't bring your own input. Yani it's just a one-sided conversation. And when I want to talk about for parents and for kids, I think that the youth would very much appreciate it if their parents would take more time to listen and also include them in their own lives. So, there is no one right way to be a parent, and there is no one right way to be a kid, especially with lives and years changing and generations and society changing. But when you really want something positive to be happening in your family and you want to like have good things for your kids and for yourself and your family, I really do think that involving them in your life, in how you make choices, in how you see things, and also keeping an open mind so that they can feel comfortable enough to come to you with topics is one of the biggest thing that I see. I have 16 nieces and nephews, big family, and most of what I do is I tell them, come to me if you have a question about something. If they want to talk about social issues, because I'm an activist and organizer in Detroit, I tell them, let's talk about this. What are your thoughts? And maybe they don't have the same outlook as me. Sometimes they're confused on Black Lives Matter. Sometimes they're confused on issues on if I talk to them about social media, the first thing they'll say is be like, but we'd have nothing else, pandemic, and they'll get defensive because they'll think that I'm trying to get them or I'm trying to punish them. But I feel that the best thing to do really is to open up that conversation with your kids and be genuine about it. Think about, yeah. Yeah. So he mentioned to Imam mentioned to model an example. So okay, a kid comes up, or your son, your daughter, your child, somebody in your family has a question about something going on in the world. Let's say, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement, because I can speak on that. Um, they imagine that they have a like they think that I don't want to say it, but that the cops are right. How would you go into that? How would you talk to them? Automatically, I disagree with being angry with them. I know I even myself can get triggered by some things and be really upset. But this child, these kids, they're looking up to us for the healthy way. They're not really trying to, they like I said, there's no right way to be a kid nor grow up in our society. So they're only trying to get some answers. And I think it's best to get the answers from our families, from people who we love. So if we automatically are defensive, or they're really, they're expecting it to be hurt and they'll get triggered, or we are, automatically attacking them, like how I can say from our previous family and parents and stuff, how they think conversations should go, then they're not going to listen. And they're just going to think that we're arguing with them. And what is going to happen? The same issue over and over. And I think that it would be much better if we had this conversation or these conversations with them, so that they can come to a trusted source and a safe space, a safe source, which is our family, which is us. So I would, for any youth about any issue, I would have them come and tell me how they feel, their perspective. And if I don't know anything about it, I'd sit with them and we'd look it up. And we'd try to see information about it. We'd work really hard, and I would try to gain a connection with them and let them feel that I'm also learning, or that we're also, learning this together. And I think the togetherness and the connection is the most important thing. So if we keep the distance between, oh, we're the elder, we're the older, and also, I know better and you're just learning, yeah, that's never going to come together, and they're always going to be far away. So that when they're growing up and they have more questions and they're kind of confused, they'll go to social media. They'll go to Google and they'll get different types of topics. And I know that it's not completely wrong that they're learning, learning more information and all of these things. But would you rather that they go to a stranger about a topic, or you? And how would you, as a parent, if you were in that situation and you were in this generation, how would you navigate that, or want someone to treat you? So that's my main thing, is to think about the kids and also think about how you would want to be treated in that way. So
Well, I think everything have been said already about the family. Not everything is delusion, but a lot it is delusion in social media, and we should know when to take a break, when it starts to affect us and our relationships, because the reality is that time is now. Our kids is not, they are not going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 years old all the time. They are going to grow, they are going to live, they are going to get married. We have to learn when to take a break, for us to breathe, for us to focus on ourselves and our family, because time doesn't forgive. That's it. Thank you so much for everyone, to everyone.
So we thank everyone. Alhamdulillah. Salatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Wa nastaghfirullah wa natubu ilayh.